Until now, voluntariness has been regarded as an indication of British values, but the Omicron mutation could change course. Boris Johnson calls for national conversation. After Boris Johnson announced new measures to protect against the Omicron variant, there was a dispute on Thursday about its logic. One newspaper summarized them in the headline, "Don't go to work, but go to parties." But the real explosives were elsewhere. For the very first time, the Prime Minister had made it clear that compulsory vaccination is not always a taboo in the kingdom. Similar to the German government, the British had always ruled out compulsory vaccination. It was said to run counter to British values. Johnson liked to use the phrase that a duty is not the way we do things here. But when he was asked about it on Wednesday, a tone could be heard that was previously more familiar from Germany or Austria. "I don't think that we can continue with non-pharmaceutical interventions permanently, with restrictions on our way of life, just because, unfortunately, I didn't want our society to have a culture of forcing people to vaccinate," said Johnson. Well, should the vaccines prove to be effective against Omicron, one needs a national discussion on the way forward. Some interpreted this as a hidden indication of a change of course. Well, we're used to U-turns by him. When Health Minister Sajid Javid was asked about this on Thursday on the BBC, he calibrated his answer. He said he was not interested in statutory vaccination regulations. He hadn't ruled out anything. But Javid also said, "My view is that this is unethical and would also not work on a practical level. There should only be compulsory vaccination for nurses and doctors." Great Britain is still under less pressure than those countries in which vaccination is to become compulsory. The number of new infections has remained surprisingly stable in the past few weeks, albeit at a high level, and it's rising a bit now. But the Omicron variant gives the experts a gloomy view of the winter. Without measures, the number of hospital admissions would rise to 1,000 a day in January, warned model calculators at the beginning of the week. It is uncertain whether the now gradually tightened requirements, the expansion of the mask requirement, return to work from home where possible, and the introduction of vaccination or test certificates for nightclubs and major events will, noticeably slow down development. In the government district, it is whispered that a new lockdown will be necessary after New Year's at the latest. And, by the way, 2 UK cabinet ministers were isolated after being in close contact with Australian Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce, who later tested positive for COVID. Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister and Attorney General, and Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, withdrew after their contact with Joyce when he was visiting London earlier this week. Yeah. According to the law, close contacts do not have to be isolated from positive COVID cases as long as they receive a PCR test and the result is negative. However, anyone who has close contact with confirmed or suspected infection with the Omicron variant must undergo daily tests. Joyce, who is fully vaccinated, has since left the UK and only tested positive in Washington. He said in a Facebook post on Thursday that he had mild symptoms, had been tested, and was in isolation and was waiting for further advice. Shapps was due to visit a Hitachi rail vehicle assembly plant in County Durham on Thursday. In a tweet he said, as a precaution, cancelled the visit and performed a PCR test after contacting the Australian Deputy Prime Minister this week, who tested positive for COVID. Yeah, meanwhile, a spokesman for Raab said, he's being tested and self-isolating while we wait to hear whether or not the Australian Deputy Prime Minister has Omicron. In an interview with Sky News, Joyce said he didn't know when he got COVID-19, but the UK was overflowing with people preparing for Christmas and shopping. You would not believe there is a pandemic in areas of the UK, he said. Well, while in isolation, Joyce said he planned to watch cricket, do paperwork, and read a book. I have suggestions here, by the way, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. He said it hadn't changed his idea about the need to get out of the pandemic. He said, "I still agree, we can't just shut it all down," said Joyce. "The world has to move. It's not economically possible for a nation to be shut down permanently. You will go broke." Most cabinet ministers in the UK had to isolate themselves in multiple places during the pandemic, either because they infected themselves with COVID or were identified as close contact. The coronavirus spread quickly through Parliament at the start of the pandemic, and 2 of the first cases of Omicron variants to be discovered in the UK were tracked as far as the Westminster area. And from December 15th in 2021, people in England who want to attend larger concerts or clubs will need a COVID certificate or a negative test. A mask requirement also comes into force on that day. With these measures, the government, led by Prime Minister Boris Johnson, wants to prevent the spread of the new Omicron variant. They are intended to help ensure that shows can continue to run at full capacity in the future. The new regulations apply to venues that hold large crowds, but also to nightclubs. Specifically affected rooms that offer space for at least 500 people without seating, and for open-air shows without seating for more than 4,000 visitors, although the last time I got the numbers it was 5,000 for some reason. The new regulation, including antigen testing, comes in England after Scotland recently introduced it. Boris Johnson also emphasized that a vaccination certificate with a double vaccination is valid and that a mandatory booster should be checked. The Superordinate Association Live criticizes the new regulation and accuses the government of using double standards. People can roam the pubs all day without having to show their vaccination status, while live music events are now being hit hard by the new regulations. Well, something quite true about that. So far, gaming venues have taken all the necessary protective measures, and these have remained effective. Now, after a long time in which the halls had to remain closed, it is important that they remain open, they say. The association also points out that the introduction of the certificate in Scotland cost the venues a total of £250,000 per week, according to figures from the Music Venue Trust. The Scottish Music Venues Alliance speaks of a 39% drop in business since the COVID certificate came into effect in Scotland from October 1st. The British magazine IQ also quotes Michael Kill, CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association, the NTIA, who attributes the vaccination cards to a destructive effect on the night economy. He also stresses that the UK government had previously ruled out the introduction of such certificates, but do so now. The effects on the live sector, which has already been badly hit, are devastating, said Kill. And once again, there you can see the different mentalities. In Germany, that is a rule and a law for a long time already. Wherever I go, even if I want to buy some clothes, I have to show my vaccination certificate. And only if I'm vaccinated or recovered, I am allowed to go into that shop. And the mask requirement in shops and on buses and trains and stuff like that was never lifted in Germany during the pandemic so far. And while I'm filming this right here, the German Bundestag, our federal parliament, is bringing through a new law that makes vaccinations compulsory for nurses and all people working in care homes, even the cleaners and the housekeepers, whatever. And they are preparing a compulsory vaccination for everyone. And I think that will pass Parliament in the beginning of next year. And seriously, except some anti-vaxxers here in Germany, which are a very minor minority, nobody is against this. Nobody, the vast majority has no problem with certificates or with a compulsory vaccination. In the last polls, around 80% of the Germans are in favor of compulsory vaccinations. And it will come. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.